and I had to pause them, and I was like, how many weeks have you been in this program? You know, and they weren't even halfway through. So then all of a sudden it wasn't like, look how much space there is to where we want to be. I'm like, look how much we've grown and changed in a good way. Like we're skipping steps that we don't have to take those kinds of steps because we've already like accounted for that, like being home, being
Yeah.
together, having structure, having mentorship, having guidance.
Today, we'll be answering a question that many men ask themselves during their recovery journey, which is, how do I know if we're actually making progress? And we have joining us today Tate Pearce. He's one of our couples recovery advisors. He's also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he has his master's in communication. He does work with couples that we have going through the relationship rebuild program. And we are very honored to have him as a member of our team, and I'm very glad that you could join us today, Tate. We'd love for you to be able to share with the people watching and listening today just a little bit more about your history and what it was that really drew you to the mission that we have here.
Yeah, thanks. Super excited to be here. I have a background in marriage and family therapy and communication. So my master's degree is actually marriage and family therapy, and my undergrad was in communication. At the very beginning of my career in the mental health and therapy world, I wound up working for an addiction recovery program in an inpatient treatment center that treated specifically men with pornography and sexual addiction. Spent some other time in other facilities that treated addiction. I worked with substance abuse. I've also worked in with a lot of complex trauma. Coming back here was really exciting for me in that it's been really awesome to kind of come full circle back to my roots, so to speak. So yeah, particularly, I think the main thing that excited me about this program, and I've said this before in other videos, but the fact that couples get to do this together um, I don't know still anyone else who's doing that. I tell people this all the time. I don't know anyone who's done what the two of you are doing. I thought it was cool coming around this and like knowing that, but now having been here for some time, I don't know how long I've actually been here, 6 months or so.
Mhm.
Um, it's like I already thought it was cool, but now I have kind of like such a testimony of how effective and important that is to do the work together for these couples. A lot of men ask that question of like, how do I know that I'm making progress? And I think that's important. And I think that part of the answer lies in how you're reflected in within your relationship. And so, yeah, this is just as time goes on, I get more and more excited about this.
Thank you for sharing. I know that we have so many couples who even express to us in different ways through direct messages or even on our founders calls or the women's only or the men's only groups that we have, how much help they get from being on those different calls that you do host. So again, thank you so much for the work that you do with the couples and just the incredible value that you are bringing not only to our team, but the value that you're bringing to their relationships.
Yeah, it's happy to be here. Genuinely,
Awesome.
genuinely, yeah.
So as we're looking more into the question, how do I know if we're making progress? I know that it's definitely, men are asking this question, women are asking this question, and truthfully, couples going through the challenge of this recovery journey from porn and sexual addiction, they're often on the brink of giving up. Like that's how difficult this journey is. And the reason for that is because of the intensity of the emotional roller coaster that they're experiencing day in and day out. It is absolutely draining and exhausting. And so when you think about like, if you're not sure that there's any hope that that's ever going to change, and you don't know that there's ever any end in sight to that roller coaster, then it makes sense that their brains are naturally going to be looking for, well, how can I get out of this suffering, right? What's the quickest way to end this? So really what we want to go into today is going to be also looking at how do we not only know that we're making progress, but how do we stay in this long enough to be making that progress? So what's something that you're seeing, Tate? You were sharing with me the other day just how excited you are as you're doing these classes with couples on our Tuesdays Conversations at Connect class. You are sharing just how much change you're seeing, even not being like even halfway through the program. What do you think is helping couples the most to be making that kind of progress that quickly?
Yeah. Um, I think there's a couple of different things. My mind is in like 10 different places, so hopefully I remember everything that's coming to mind. But
Sure.
yeah, what's helping them? I think there's a couple of things. I think, like I was saying, doing the work together as a couple, like from the beginning, is actually a pretty rare thing outside of like couples therapy or you know, like there's intensives and things out there, but the caliber of the work that they're doing, I think, is just different than what they're doing in or what you would do in, say, like couples therapy. Obviously, I'm a marriage and family therapist, so I very much believe in therapy, but everything has its limitations. A memory, an experience that I had at Desert Solace that has really stuck with me since being there, and it comes up a lot for me. And what had happened was um, there was a guy in our program who just did awesome. Just from day one was invested, was you know, did his best to be honest with himself, was humble, and really was there just to do the work. And we saw it. You know, we he was there for 90 days, and his transformation was incredible. One of the more like impactful um, experiences and just observing this person grow. And what has stayed with me was the day that he graduated. They did a final therapy session with him and his wife. They went straight from that therapy session into his graduation. It just the energy coming out of that, you could tell there was something that came from that. You could see how much pain and hurt was still in his wife's eyes. You could see in him how much fear and anxiety there was about going home. And I think that's such a representation of kind of what happens is a lot of the time a guy will go to treatment, they'll go to intensive outpatient, they'll go to inpatient treatment, they'll do individual therapy, whatever it is, and they'll grow, they'll transform, they'll learn, they'll self-reflect, they'll process, you know, trauma, inner child stuff, and we all get to see that, you know, those of us in that arena who are helping, but guess who doesn't? The person who is most important, their spouse, right? And their wife is still at home. She's still hurt. She's still betrayed. She can't trust him yet. She still has betrayal trauma that she needs to overcome. And so it almost it just feels like starting over a lot of the time where these men will come, they'll make these amazing changes, they'll have growth, and then it's kind of like, okay, good luck with your relationship now, you know, like,
Mhm.
sorry.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
by the way, this program where I worked, like I said at the beginning, amazing program. I still recommend them for people who are at that point of needing inpatient treatment, where that's an option. Like there's a reason inpatient exists. But like I said at the beginning, there's just limitations to everything. And so I think coming full circle, the reason I share that story is seeing these couples start at the beginning together. It's a lot tougher. Well, from what I've seen, like the work is a lot harder starting out, but the growth is just so much faster. And so like you're getting to these really tough conversations sooner and this tough work sooner. So then when you get to things like, say, disclosure, or you're getting to things like, you know, communication dynamics, it's like that feels so much different than when you haven't laid the groundwork already, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. There's some other, I think, other reasons why. For one is the structure, you know, like having the question answered of like, what am I supposed to be doing on a daily basis to be actively engaged in recovery? You don't really get that out of therapy as much. Not that you can't, but from my experience, what I've observed is most people don't. Um, and so like having the structure as well as having the coaching and mentorship of like from a third party, especially from people who have been there, who have done that. I think there's just so much value in like that daily structure and routine. And also they're at home, so it's not like they're going somewhere else to get this and then having to figure out how to translate that when they get home, like they're home, you know. And so I
Right.
think there's just so many like we're just in a good way, like we're skipping steps that we don't have to take those kinds of steps because we've already like accounted for that, like being home, being
Yeah.
together. having structure, having mentorship, having guidance.
It's all so well said and completely agree with you. And I think there's even there's a even stronger purpose even to what you're saying with why it's so important for her to be a part of that recovery journey is that it's it's also going to be lacking in the ability for her to see evidence for the changes that are
Absolutely.
happening.
Yep.
So his recovery can get set back because he's now, he's made all this progress, but then not being recognized and understood for that hard work and effort he's put in.
Yeah.
And she is not getting to have her brain witness the reason for changes. So it's not allowing her to feel safe. And that's not allowing for her healing to be able to progress the way that it needs to when she can't tangibly understand the changes that are happening and why.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they haven't observed that transformation. They see like how they left and then how they come home, but she's still left wondering, like, is this real? Like
Right.
I've been told it is, but hasn't been home. He hasn't been around the same kinds of triggers that exist here, the same association, right? So it's completely reasonable for a wife to be in that position where like, well, I can't believe it yet. It's like, yeah,
Right.
you haven't seen it. And so now it's kind of like starting over. Like now you have to wait however long until you can finally start to like allow yourself to trust again. And that
Yeah.
can take a long time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's so much to go into a recovery process. As you mentioned, just the environmental change from going from inpatient to being at home. One of the biggest things that influences human behavior and habits in general is our environment. And
Absolutely.
so there's so much work to be considered for, a guy who's leaving that environment who maybe isn't even aware that when he goes home, it's going to be a different experience.
It's really important that that work is being done together as a couple. So, what does it actually take to get through to the other side of this together? Let's zero in a little bit on what it means. So, we all know that when we know that we have there's an end in sight, we know we can hang on longer, right? That's something that allows us to expand our emotional tolerance for suffering is when we know that there's an end in sight. We know that what we're doing is making a difference and that difference is going to one day create what we want in our life. I broke this down into two things that it's patience and persistence that really is what equals progress. Because without patience, we obviously will give up. Like we're just saying, it's not going to be something we can sustain. If we have no patience, we give up. And if we aren't persistent, we don't actually get anywhere. So then, of course, we're not actually making progress. So we really have to combine patience and persistence in order to make progress. When it comes to patience and breaking that down, how do couples actually have more patience for the process? The first thing is education, because without education, they have no idea what's really happening. Can you speak to what it's like as you're seeing couples come into this program and you're finding them actually beginning to learn all the different things about what's actually happening for him, what's actually happening for her, and they're beginning to understand each other? What do you observe is happening for couples when they're getting through that part of the program?
Yeah. So I get like anyone that I speak with who is considering the program, I would say almost 100%, if not 100%, ask themselves the question of like, how do I know what's part of the process and what's not, right? So whether it's what should progress look like or what should setbacks look like, because I think there is a difference between like genuine progress or fake progress, or like a setback that's probably part of the process that's a learning experience, and a setback that happened because we're not actually doing the work that we ought to be doing, right? And I think that's been a huge step is from the beginning, again, through structure, through coaching and mentorship, and through like observation, doing the work together. What couples are learning from the beginning is how to know what to expect, right? And so in terms of like, because they're learning, they're being educated on what's going on in the brain and what that looks like to reprogram. And so wives are able to say, okay, is this a setback or is this something that like is part of the process that we can work on? It's just versus like, I don't know what he's doing, you know? And then same with, I think it's been great for a lot of the husbands who are learning about, um, like more about where their wife is actually coming from when it comes to betrayal, when it comes to building trust, and when it comes to repairing the relationship. I think that's the main thing though that these couples are seeing is just how to know what to expect. And so when there's a setback or progress, I think there's a really high level of reassurance that comes from knowing, okay, this is part of the process, or it's not, and now we get to work with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a key piece in this journey with being able to have the appropriate expectations is the ability to ask additional questions to people that can give you direct answers for, yes,
Absolutely.
this is something that is a reasonable part of the process that makes sense for why this different dynamic is coming up. And here's what you can expect moving forward in this particular area. And to have that reassurance and that guidance to help you know that you're not crazy is priceless. It really is. This that mental clarity and sanity that can come from being assured that you are seeing evidences of changes is a complete game changer.
Yeah, if you don't have understanding of what it is that you're going through and why things are happening, you don't know there's even a process to be going through, then it's really hard to have patience in order to withstand all of the emotional ups and downs and the suffering that you're going through, especially I'd say for the woman on their side of this journey. The second thing is gratitude. When we're talking about being able to have patience to be able to make progress, gratitude changes everything. And I think that probably for a lot of ladies, they're like, how am I supposed to have gratitude right now? And I get that. I want to first acknowledge that makes perfect sense why, if you're thinking that you'd be thinking that, because this is not an easy thing to be going through. We didn't ask for this. And the betrayal trauma is one of the most difficult traumas to experience as a human being. So I really, really get where you're coming from. And I want to challenge you to know that it's really important that we do focus on the things that we can have gratitude for, even in this journey. Because if you think about when we're focused on only the negative and only the things that are happening to us, what we don't have control over, or we think about all the worst what ifs, then our brain can only see that, and it will manifest more of it. What we focus on expands. And so when we do think about what we can be grateful for and we are looking for those things, we will find more of those things. So the things that we can be grateful for in this process are things like, hey, I am grateful that we're in a process together. I'm grateful that we have guidance, that there is somebody that has gone through this before us that we're learning from. I'm grateful that my partner is admitting this is an issue and isn't just trying to deny it anymore or wants to pretend that it's me that has the issue. I'm grateful that I have a man that's actually trying to do the work it's going to take to become a better version of himself so that we can possibly have an amazing relationship. Those are the types of things that when we frame it in those ways, our brain actually allows for more emotional tolerance, more emotional regulation, more positive energy that's added to the environment of your recovery journey and to your relationship as a couple. And when you can speak life into those things, that it gets easier and easier to do that. And even when it's hard and challenging, it doesn't mean ignoring all of the pain. It doesn't mean pretending the pain doesn't exist. It just means choosing to allow both, choosing to allow your brain to know that there is something here that's positive and that will come from all of this hardship. And that progression in progress can be made when we're even quicker when we are focusing on those things than if we're not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one other thing that I would add as well is I know there are women listening to this, and probably men too, who hear that suggestion of creating space for gratitude and working on that, and might still feel some resistance to that. I think it creates sometimes, or we create or feel within ourselves, um, this dichotomy. It almost feels unfair, I think, like to create space for gratitude. And so I would just say if you're feeling that resistance or that disconnect to that as you listen to that, that's normal. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. My recommendation would be maybe try it and see how that goes first. You can start small. We're not saying you have to completely switch over to gratitude, right? We're creating space for both. And if that's even too much, maybe start outside and work your way in. So start outside with outside of the relationship with other things you're grateful for, and then work your way into the relationship. And you can still create space for both of those. But it's normal to feel that resistance or to that. And it's normal for that to almost feel unfair. But it'll work. It's weird, but it will.
100%. That's
Well
actually
said.
something that worked really well in our relationship was Katie did a lot of gratitude journaling. And it was really time and consistency of that that led into when she was able to have more appreciation and gratitude for my side of the journey and what that was like for me, and to really give me that piece of healing that I was needing for myself and for a relationship.
Yeah. I would wake up in the morning a lot of the time, just having my nervous system dysregulated immediately upon waking. And it would feel like I was in danger and that I had to protect myself because there was so much that I had become so hypervigilant about in our journey. And I didn't feel safe just at any moment of any day. So when you're thinking about like you've got betrayal trauma and you're constantly feeling like you're needing to protect yourself, and you're hoping to feel close and attached to your partner at the same time, it's such a place of suffering to be in that mental hell. And when you wake up in the morning, your subconscious is really running the show until your subconscious is all the way online. So for me, I would wake up and immediately have anxiety. So what I did to counteract that is I began to list out in my mind first thing, what am I grateful for? And I would try to make myself come up with 10 things before I got out of bed. And then additionally, I would come downstairs and I would spend about 30 minutes to an hour to myself. I'd try to get up early enough to do this and spend an hour journaling, getting out all of the fears, all the anxiety, and also making a gratitude list there too. So it was very, very helpful in the reprogramming and healing journey for me, definitely. So we've really broken down and unpacked patience and what it takes to have patience in this process. We've talked about the two things that really make that possible is when we're educated and we can understand what's happening, why it's happening, and what our process looks like to get to where we want to go. And then we talked about having gratitude in that process and for it. So now let's look at persistence. Persistence basically can also be broken down into two things. And the first of those is right action. Having not just a passiveness where we're just waiting for things to change. That's not persistence, right? I mean, I guess it can be if it's all out of your control, but this process isn't out of your control. And especially for the guys, this has to be 100% radical responsibility that it is only in his control, whether or not he does get to the other side of this. So for both partners, and especially for him, it's about right action. It's about making sure that you're not just sitting around and believing that time will pass and that everything's going to change because time passed, but it's about taking those actionable steps towards the direction that you want to be going. It's making sure that your actions are intentional and that you're knowing why you're taking the steps you're taking, that you're taking steps in the right direction. Something not in motion doesn't get anywhere. Like we can't even course correct something if it's not in motion. So that's why it's really, really important that we are taking actionable steps in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that if there's any men listening to that it does have to be radical responsibility on your part, that can feel really scary, but it should actually feel very empowering, that it is actually up to you, as long as you understand the destination that you're headed toward and you know the steps to take to get there. That becomes very empowering because as you're able to observe yourself taking steps and getting closer to your destination, you become and recognize yourself as the agent of change in your life. And that creates a lot of hope for people. And I think that just in the program, what we're observing, or what I'm observing rather, is um, a higher degree of confidence when there's not a question of like, what should I be doing today? I think one thing I hear from a lot of people who are considering the program is I know what needs to be fixed, I just don't know how to do it. And that's because if you were to imagine a number graph, you're trying to go from 0 to 10, right? Rather than from 0 to 1 and then from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3. And when you're able to, when you create some structure and some systems and you have the direction, again, through coaching and mentorship, right, and programming, it becomes very empowering and hopeful to like have the direction and be able to identify the steps, and it feels so much less overwhelming. One thing that's really interesting that a couple of weeks ago in the group that I run, I heard a couple saying something along the lines of like, this situation happened. Here's how we handled it. It went really well. We were still a little bit frustrated that we couldn't do like X, Y, and Z. And I had to pause them and I was like, how many weeks have you been in this program? You know, and they weren't even halfway through. And it was just it was really cool to see the progress they were making, and then they were future pacing by like, here's where we would like to be. But then they were able to remind themselves like the steps they'd taken to get to where they were. And so then all of a sudden it wasn't like, look how much space there is to where we want to be, and like, look how much we've grown and changed. And it's so encouraging.
That's awesome.
Yeah, love that so much. It really is about what's the transformation. Like how far have we already come? That can be such a difficult thing to look back on and reflect, to review the progress that's been made in recovery journeys, whether it's his recovery journey or her healing journey. Any emotions that we really feel, they feel permanent. They feel like this is never going to change. Like in this moment, those emotions feel so strong, like this is never going to be different. And sometimes that's to our benefit because they're really positive, enjoyable moments. And then other times it really goes against us because they're extremely difficult moments where it feels kind of builds into that hopelessness and helplessness when we can't see how it could possibly be different.
Mhm.
And so having help and guidance through someone like yourself, especially when it comes to communication dynamics with couples, it's such an important piece because so many men and women too haven't developed the communication skills that they need in order to be able to navigate this together.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that we, are commonly and frequently expressing to the different clients that we work with is that so much of what it is that you're each working on are skills.
Mhm.
It only gets better and improves with deliberate and intentional actions. And so it's absolutely necessary that you can see what those right action steps are.
The second piece to persistence is self-care, because we can be taking all these right actions, but with the overwhelm and the energy that it takes to take those actions and the length of time that we have to be consistent with these things, if we're not taking care of ourselves, we are not going to be able to continue to be persistent. So self-care is critical, and it's all about taking care of our mind and our body in the process. It's really, when it comes down to it, it's about our nutrition, it's about our sleep, it's about emotional regulation, it's about coping mechanisms, it's about knowing what it takes to be able to continue to be persistent. I know for myself, when we were in our journey, it was exercise really that I clung to, because I was so emotionally dysregulated constantly, and it was very, very challenging to live in that space and try to function as a mom and also try to move forward in any other areas of life. So it really, for me, had to do with being consistent with exercise and not putting all this junk in my body all the time that would bring my capacity down for my tolerance and for being able to handle those really difficult emotions when they would come up. What was it for you, Rick, in our process that you used to really help you maintain the longevity you needed for this? Because this was not just hard on me, because the process is hard and long for both people. So for you, what was it that you clung to that helped you be able to stay persistent in our process?
Yeah, and I didn't even realize how important this piece actually was for me at the time, but I would say the same. It was really nutrition and exercise. That was one of the biggest things that Katie and I had going for us throughout our process. And now, being where we are now, looking back, just being able to recognize how important those mental health benefits were in that process for us, it's so clear to me how I was able to endure all the different efforts that were required of me to make that transformation. And I don't believe that I could have done it without it. My exercise over the last couple of years as we've grown this business and this mission, is completely fallen off the cliff. And now that we're finally getting back into it, it's like, oh my gosh, this feels so good.
Yeah.
How have we just like completely neglected the self-care for the last 2 years? And when you go into survival mode, it's really easy to want to do that.
Yeah.
And so I just can't speak highly enough about the importance of exercise and nutrition to fuel your brain and your body for the different neurochemicals that it needs in order to stay in that healthy space. Because when you look at different studies of the mental benefits that you get from exercise, it's like the gold standard of mental health. You can get more effective benefits from exercise than you can from medication.
And it also speeds up the process of neuroplasticity, which is the number one key for recovery.
Right. So yeah, I would say hands down the biggest thing for me was exercise and nutrition. And I know for you, Tate, you've mentioned in different conversations in passing, oh yeah, I just got done at the gym, or today even when you said, yeah, I just finished a half marathon. And so obviously health and nutrition is something that's important in your life as well.
Yeah, definitely. Also same, not where I want to be in the realm of health and nutrition. Probably nobody is, but yeah, as a therapist, I often say exercise, nutrition, hydration, and sleep are the four most underrated things that you can do for yourself for self-care. Along with that, I heard kind of recently, I heard someone say that self-care is not pampering. And I think that's a really important distinction to make is actually self-care often are things that we don't want to do, but that actually energize us. They add to our life. And I think sometimes people think doing self-care is doing things that we want to do that might actually be taking away from our life. Like it's much easier to, like one thing as a therapist I hear all the time is people like to spend time on their phones with their downtime. And like I do too. But typically, if I sit down for an hour and mess around on my phone, that does not add to my life the same way that exercising or meditating or reading, right? Those kinds of things those are things that add to my life that I tend to not want to do. I don't like to run. I prefer to eat unhealthy, but those aren't things that add to my life. So I think that's one thing that I would add. And then on top of that too, just an observation is if you were to make a list of everything in your life that adds, that would be like a self-care activity. Um, I've never seen someone in therapy who's doing all of those things. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but I've never seen a client come into therapy who said, "Yeah, I'm on top of all of that." And so I think that we've definitely put more attention on it, I think, in the mental health world in recent years. In some productive ways, maybe some non-productive. Because, like I said, I think sometimes people interpret self-care as just doing whatever I want, when in reality, that's probably not always going to add to your life. But yeah, I think it's still just an underrated thing. Like I think those are easy to neglect. If you've read The Slight Edge, he talks about how oftentimes it's not that our habits are hard to do, it's just that they're easy not to do. And so they're easy things to not do, but when we do them, they add. Just like if we're not doing them, that's also going to compound. We're not just going to sit in the middle, right? We're going to go one way or the other. And so, yeah, absolutely
Well
super
said.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well said.
Love that so much. And, for both men and women who are going through this journey together, helping things to feel easier is such an important element to being able to make the changes that each one of us want to make.
Yeah, as far as how to know if you're making progress, I think it really helps when you have someone who can tell you, hey, this is part of the process. And like especially someone who's been there, having like that additional structure and the additional like coaching that provides that reassurance, but also knowing like where it is that you actually want to be, having that clearly defined and understanding the steps that need to be taken so that you can identify when you've taken one of those steps. That's what allows you to look back and say, okay, here's where we came from. Right? And that's what creates hope for the future. But having someone that can say, yes, this is normal, this is part of the process, or just being educated in general. Maybe that's a better way to say it. It's like understanding what the process looks like.
So we've really looked at what it takes to make progress. And now let's come back to our question, how do we know we're making progress? I think that a really good way to evaluate that is to slow down and take the time to self-reflect and maybe even journal about it. Ask yourself, okay, where were we at a month ago? What did things feel like? Where were we at 3 months ago? And depending on how long you've been working on this, what was it like a year ago? When we can actually take that time to see where those changes have happened, that's where we notice. We slow down enough to see, okay, progress is happening. It may not be as quickly as I want it to be happening. And like we said earlier, it never is. But at least when we see changes happening, we know that we're headed in the right direction. A lot of times we think that progress is this straight linear line, right? That we hope that it's going to feel like, okay, every day we made progress. And there's even that saying of a 1% better every day. It's not reality, honestly. Like progress doesn't look like a straight line. Progress really looks like this squiggly line of mess until you find yourself up here and you're like, oh, okay, all of that mattered. Like all of that journey that felt so chaotic and I didn't know what was going on or how I was ever going to see, the other side of this, it all counted towards something. It all mattered. Even I would say the parts where it feels like it is a setback, things aren't really setbacks unless we give up. Every single time we have setbacks, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn and grow and figure out where we didn't do things the way we could have done them or should have done them or how we wanted to do them, right? And a lot of times maybe we couldn't have done them yet the way we wanted to because we hadn't progressed enough in certain areas. We didn't understand things a certain way yet. We can be really hard on ourselves and believe that that's a setback. But in reality, when we are using everything for growth, there's really no such thing as a setback. We have to make sure that we are learning and growing and taking accountability for why things didn't go the way we wanted them to, 100%. But we can use that to move us forward.
And sometimes we don't know what that's supposed to look like. If we know it's not going to be a straight line from point A to B, so that education piece, knowing what that ought to look like, as well as someone who can tell you, no, this is normal, this is part of the process, because I know something that the two of you have said before is, had you had someone like that, it would have really helped, right? Am I saying that correctly?
Absolutely.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know I felt that way with different things in my life, like, how should I be feeling about this right now? Like that question comes up a lot of like, okay, here's what's going on, and I don't know how I should feel about this. Should I be upset? Is it a genuine like setback, or is it just something that's part of the process that I need to learn from?
Absolutely. And that leads into really a great shameless plug about the support groups that we do have, because the support groups we have, they're open to everybody, but they're something that we include for free for those who are participating in the Relationship Rebuild program. And so it's a really great opportunity for both men and women to be able to enter those communities and be able to ask questions and say, am I actually making progress? Is this what this journey actually looks like? Are there other things that I should have as goals? Please take us up on our 50% offer that we offer for those groups for the first month. If you want to sign up, you could find those at rewireforsuccess.life. And when you find the groups, you can go ahead and enter promotion code 5050OFF, OFF, and you'll get 50% off your first month of that membership. Thank you, Tate, so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. And again, always just so grateful to have you on our team. You bring such value to those who we are working with.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for trusting me to be here. And thanks for the invitation. It's been great.
Thanks everyone for being here. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.